Hey, it's NPR's Book of the Day. I'm Andrew Limbong. All right, as I write this, my X timeline is flooded with people talking about, you know what, it actually doesn't matter. Because by the time you hear this, something new in the news will have happened that will overshadow whatever it is that's going on now. So today, I want to rescue you from the hyperspeed of the news cycle and bring you two interviews that are about slowing down and looking to the outdoors for inspiration. In a bit, we'll hear from a journalist and activist whose life was radically changed after she took up birding. But first, the botanist Robin Wall Kimmerer's book, Braiding Sweetgrass, became a slow burn hit. It's a book about gleaning life lessons from plants. And now Kimmerer's out with a follow-up titled The Serviceberry. And in this interview with NPR's Ari Shapiro, she talks about fighting back against an economy that begs us to consume more. That's coming up.
Support for this podcast and the following message come from Cunard, inviting you to take in the sounds of Alaska. Relax on spacious decks with 360-degree views as you cruise through Glacier Bay National Park. Hear the call of a bald eagle or the song of a humpback whale as you take in the beauty of Alaska's snow-capped mountains from your own private balcony. More at cunard.com/Alaska.
Since she's a botanist, let's say Robin Wall Kimmerer's last book bloomed slowly. It was called Braiding Sweetgrass, Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teachings of Plants. A small nonprofit press published the book in 2013. It spread by word of mouth. And 7 years later, it hit the New York Times bestseller list in paperback. It has now sold more than 2 million copies, and the author was recognized with a MacArthur Genius Grant. Professor Kimmerer, who is a member of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation, has followed up Braiding Sweetgrass with a new book-length essay that explores similar themes. It's called The Serviceberry, Abundance and Reciprocity in the Natural World. So good to have you with us.
It's an honor to talk with you.
The Serviceberry begins with a scene of harvest. So tell us what you were doing and what went through your mind.
I was harvesting serviceberries, also known as June berries, and they were so abundant. I was picking them by the handsful and really got to thinking about kind of the economy of abundance and what the generosity of a tree like serviceberries could teach us about our own human economies.
Let's dig into that phrase, economy of abundance, because at the heart of this book, you, a botanist, are making an economic argument. What is the shift that you're encouraging people to make, both conceptually and in their actual lives?
Yeah, what I'm really interested in is thinking about how could we imagine a human economy with a kind of currency that works like ecological economies, the economies of nature. And when we think about the extractive capitalist economy that we're all enmeshed in, it breaks a lot of the rules of how natural landscapes are organized. And so it's really an inquiry to say, could we imagine a human economy which is based on reciprocity rather than extraction? Could we imagine an economy which is circular and regenerative rather than an industrial pipeline, etc. So it's kind of an examination of biomimicry, of what could we learn from the economies of nature.
And it does exist in some places in our lives. As you say, this doesn't have to come entirely from our imagination. What are some places in the human world where we can see this in practice today?
Well, gift economies are quite well known and widespread in indigenous cultures, particularly traditional peoples. So there are many examples, both in my Potawatomi cultures and potlatch cultures, in Polynesian cultures, that use the gift economy in order to distribute goods and services without a market. But, I think there are also lots of examples in our everyday life, if we really pay attention. One that I like to think about is things like little free libraries. That's a way of sharing literature with your whole community, right? And then we scale that to public libraries. So the notion is we don't all have to own everything. Abundance comes from sharing what we have.
As I read it, I wondered if public radio could be considered a gift economy, but that probably shows my own bias.
You're absolutely right. We just finished Pledge Week here. And I was thinking that the whole time. I thought, I should have included NPR as a gift economy. It totally is.
You write, recognizing enoughness is a radical act in an economy that is always urging us to consume more. What does that mean in practice, to recognize enoughness?
Well, I think of it as a radical act because of all of the messages that we get from corporate America telling us, if you buy this, you'll be more successful, you'll be happier, you just can't live without this, right? There are all these messages that tell us consume, consume, consume. In fact, we are often referred to not as citizens, but as consumers. And so this idea of putting the brakes on consumption is really important, particularly when we know that climate change is a product of hyperconsumption, right? The more we consume, the more damage that we're doing to the planet. And so if we can start to put the brakes on consumption through practices like gratitude and reciprocity, we say, I already have everything that I need. I really don't need to buy that next thing. Instead, I'm going to invest in relationship. I'm going to invest in belonging rather than belongings. And, I think I know it's good for the planet, but it's also good for us.
As somebody who is a trained botanist, how did trained economists respond when you approached them and started to describe some of these ideas?
I was really pleased that they listened with me and could imagine, in fact, in many cases, are already engaging in this idea of biomimicry, of how can we change our economic systems so that they don't degrade the very life support systems that all life depends on. So ecological economists are already thinking in this direction and working in really creative ways that, as a botanist, I can only barely understand. And so it was exciting to me to know that the economics community is thinking about this, at least some of them.
Has it been surprising for you to see the way these ideas that you put forward in such a humble, small way initially in 2013 have just, forgive the metaphor, but spread like a tenacious plant?
Yes, it is to me, again, really uplifting and gives me a lot of hope, because what I hear from readers practically every day is this real longing to live in a world that values the native species around us, that values the natural world. And it was as if Braiding Sweetgrass and the work of so many others gave people a permission to passionately love the world and to act on its behalf. One of the things that is most moving to me is that people will write to me and say, you issued an invitation to reciprocity, to give back to the earth. And so here's what I'm doing. There are people who are, changing their classrooms, who are changing their careers, who are changing their landscapes. And to me, it represents a movement in which people are reclaiming their role as healers of land, not just despoilers of land.
Robin Wall Kimmerer's latest book is The Serviceberry, Abundance and Reciprocity in the Natural World. So good to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ari.
This message comes from Charles Schwab. When it comes to managing your wealth, Schwab gives you more choices, like full-service wealth management and advice when you need it. You can also invest on your own and trade on Think or Swim. Visit schwab.com to learn more.
This message comes from Wise, the app for doing things in other currencies. Sending or spending money abroad, hidden fees may be taking a cut. With Wise, you can convert between up to 40 currencies at the mid-market exchange rate. Visit wise.com. T&Cs apply.
Looking to nature for inspiration can feel a bit frou-frou, navel-gazy maybe, but Trish O'Kane's memoir, Birding to Change the World, gets into how birding led to actual, tangible good in the world. Here's her interview with Here and Now's Robin Young.
Are you looking for a break from the news? How about birding? Maybe don't think about birds. Trish O'Kane didn't used to think about them at all. For years, she was a busy human rights investigative journalist, a teacher at Loyola. Then, after Hurricane Katrina destroyed her home and so many lives, she heard a bird call, which launched her second life as an ornithologist, then a third as an environmental activist saving green space. A fourth, she created a birding program for little kids and a birding class for students at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and then later at the University of Vermont. Every year, the kids becoming a flock, the older mentoring the younger. Then she wrote a memoir. And what's this? The Burlington Choral Society and Orchestra put together a program of bird-related songs based on her book. Trish O'Kane's memoir is Birding to Change the World. She is now a senior lecturer in environmental justice at the University of Vermont. Boy, Trish, we leave you alone for 1 second and you add another layer to your story. Hi.
Hi, Robin. Thank you.
And this program reminds us, how composers love birds. But I want to go back to how this all started. You did deep human rights investigative journalism in Nicaragua, covering the Sandinistas. I think you interpreted once for a visiting Jimmy Carter.
That's correct. Yes.
Researched hate crimes back in the U.S. for the Southern Poverty Law Center. But then Katrina in New Orleans, it seemed it just completely threw you off your axis.
Well, it wasn't just the devastation itself. It was realizing that the reason the hurricane was so severe was because the waters of the Gulf were hotter than they had been before, and hot water fuels hurricanes. And Robin, at that time, I didn't know anything about climate change or climate science. And I was just horrified that this is going to be the future.
You were also, it sounds to me, a little bit in shock, numb, like everybody was. And then in this eerily silent New Orleans, there was a sound that changed your life.
Yes. Woke up to silence. I'm not hearing traffic. I'm not hearing neighbors because so many thousands of people were dead or hadn't returned. And then I hear a clicking. And I look out the window, and it's this beautiful red cardinal. And I realized, oh, my God, there's something alive out there. It's something beautiful and wild. And that was the beginning.
Yeah, it was the beginning of birding. You say suddenly the birds seem like the most precious being on Earth. You want to study, get your PhD?
Yes, I wanted to know what happened. And how am I a part of this?
Right. So you and your husband, Jim, moved to Madison, Wisconsin. You're going to pursue this environmental studies PhD. You study ornithology. And you live right on Warner Park. People in the area know this, but it's this gorgeous public space.
With a wetland in the middle and meadows and a woods and all kinds of birds. And we started going into it every day. It just saved our souls.
Well, and it was set for development. And here's where you kind of become like the Norma Ray, if Norma Ray were in a wetland, but an activist who didn't want to be, the white savior in this diverse neighborhood. Talk about how you approach this with the people you lived with.
First of all, listen and spend a lot of time in the park talking to neighbors and, knocking on doors and walking with people. And I found a lot of neighbors who depended on the park, as I did, for their mental health. And this was a lower income neighborhood. I mean, the park was their wealth, our wealth. And then I started reading city studies about my neighborhood and realizing, well, the city's trying to do the development for good reasons because there are some serious socioeconomic issues. But is developing the park going to solve them? I didn't think so. And a lot of other people didn't think so.
And you are now presenting before a parks commission. One day, I think when you're going for a big presentation, you walk through the park and another bird inspires you. I just want to listen for a second. We've got some sound here of the rare bittern. It's like a glugging frog. Let's listen. Those are the peepers in the back, but that's the bittern.
Yes.
And there's another Hosanna moment. You're walking to do this big presentation and you see this rare bird.
Yeah, well, this was the first meeting of this type I'd ever been to. I had no idea how we'd be received. We were coming in complaining about the city plan. And I just thought, well, I know this bird's incredible. I know it's a rare sighting in an urban setting like this. I'm just going to talk about it. And as soon as I mentioned, I had seen an American bittern in Warner Park that morning. The president of the commission sat straight up and looked at me. And then he said, I have that bird's call on my cell phone. And he tried to play it in the public meeting, and people were like, what is going on? And I thought, oh my God, this guy is a birder. Maybe we have a chance.
Yeah. You and your neighbors end up winning, but you go speak to a city councilor. And this is someone you want her to understand you're not a Patagonia-clad birder. You care about the neighborhood. And she's the one who told you, well, what about all the children that live around it and don't ever get to go to the park?
Yes. Don't just complain. You're a graduate student. Why can't you do something positive in this park? And that was the beginning of the Birding to Change the World program.
A children's program, and then you layer on that having college kids take a class where they could mentor them. What did you learn?
Robin, I'm still learning. I'm bringing the kids tomorrow to campus for our end of the semester party. I guess the most basic thing is how much we need relationships. And every week I get to watch, my students walking hand in hand, literally with these little kids, 4th and 5th graders, chattering away and learning from each other.
At one point, I think some of the little kids from the neighborhood showed up without the right socks and shoe wear. The college students were, well, who would send their kids out like this?
Yes, that's right.
You did a lesson, you had them add up the cost of all of their outdoor clothing.
Yeah, well, I added it up in class what I was wearing that day. And I was wearing $600 worth of clothes and boots. And I said to my students, add it up, make your list. And then they did, and they were shocked. And I said, okay, let's look at what, salaries are, minimum wage. And some of our kids' parents are working 2 jobs and they have 3 or 4 kids. How many people can afford a pair of these socks? I just had that conversation with my students this semester here in Burlington. How do people get outside if they can't afford this expensive stuff? But one of the things I have my students do, Robin, I learned that, if you reverse the power hierarchy, you really get some magic moments. My students have to do homework. The children assign them 2 homework questions. It's just hilarious to see my students running around doing their assignment and then turning it in to this kid who's grades it immediately while we're in the school gym.
A 10-year-old. What are some of the questions they might ask?
What is the biggest, shark or flower, or, how many kinds of cheese are there in the world? But I'll tell you, we had a question this semester from a little boy, very tender question for his mentor, who's male, about crying. And, I said, okay to cry. And who was the first person to cry? And so, the kids, when they trust their mentor, they'll ask things they wouldn't ask somebody else.
Yeah.
So there are these really beautiful exchanges, unexpected.
Look, how would you tie together all these strands? Birder, teacher, activist. You credit a Jesuit priest mentor in Nicaragua.
Yes, that was Father Javier Gorostiaga. Yeah, he said, Trish, you don't do what you want to do. You do what your community needs you to do. I thought about that a lot in Warner Park because my first instinct wouldn't have been to do a children's program because I have no children and I had no experience teaching children, much less outside. But it was the city councilor said, we need this. And then it was like, okay, well, maybe I could try. Javier's voice was in my head. He's in my conscience telling me, you should try this. You should do this because they're asking for it.
And then what you learn from the birds?
Yes. I was out this morning looking for a snowy owl because there are Arctic owls that come down this time of year. Yeah, I go out or I just sit in my backyard.
Because why?
Because it's my medicine, Robin. It's my mental health. It's also the news, right? I tell my students the news is not just what's in the media. There's news out there every day. As soon as you open your window, you can hear it. What are the birds saying? Go and watch. Go and learn. They're also our teachers, and they have news to share.
We are where we started, which is if you want to break from the screen news, check out the news, maybe right in your backyard. Trish O'Kane, her memoir is Birding to Change the World. And we're going to leave with a little more sound from the other layer to your life, which is that you sing in the Burlington Choir. They've adapted your book in this gorgeous program of bird-related music. Did you ever see that coming?
No. I sat in the first rehearsal for that concert in tears thinking, never could I have imagined in the ruins of New Orleans that years later I'd be in Vermont in a community choir and they'd be singing about birds because of that hurricane. No, never could have imagined it. It was beautiful. It was very special.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
You're welcome, Robin. Thank you.
The Burlington, Vermont Chorale and Orchestra. Trish O'Kane's memoir is Birding to Change the World.
And that's it for this week on NPR's Book of the Day. Let us know what you think. You can write to us at bookoftheday@npr.org. I'm Andrew Limbong. The podcast is produced by Danica Panetta and Chloe Weiner and edited by Megan Sullivan. Our founding editor is Petra Mayer. The show elements for this week were produced and edited by Avery Keatley, Timby Ermias, Danny Hensel, Ed McNulty, Catherine Fink, Ashley Brown, Hafsa Qureshi, Michaela Rodriguez, Todd Munt, Michael Levitt, Christopher Intagliata, and Karen Miller-Medson. Yolanda Sanguini is our executive producer. Thanks for listening.
This message comes from Best Western Hotels and Resorts. From adventures to new places, Best Western has you covered. With over 4,000 hotels worldwide, you're sure to find the right hotel for your next getaway. Life's a trip. Make the most of it at bestwestern.com. This message comes from Bombas. Their socks are super plush, designed to support your arches and support people in need. One purchase equals one donated to those experiencing homelessness. Go to bombas.com/NPR and use code NPR for 20% off your first order.
This message comes from Intuit. Need a software solution to simplify the complexities of your growing business? Transform how you manage with Intuit Enterprise Suite's powerful automation and core suite of tools for financial management, payment processing, payroll, HR, bill pay, marketing, and third-party integrations. It's how a growing business keeps growing. Visit intuit.com/enterprise to learn more. Money Movement Services by Intuit Payments, Inc., licensed by NYDFS.